So condos, apartments, things like that, utilizing solar, and I think that will continue. There's benefits that they provide to their tenants. So solar carports provide carports for vehicles, which is awesome. Benefits to those tenants. Having some battery storage and resilience is beneficial as well. We see some benefits when you're putting solar on the roof that like shingles will last longer because you're protecting them against hail, and solar panels can handle, especially if you got thicker glass panels, handle more hail than a traditional roof for a longer period of time. So there are benefits to the property that you see from implementing those.
Hello, and welcome back to the Future of CRE Sustainability. I'm your host, Sean Swentek. I'm here today with Isaac McLean, Chief Underwriting Officer at KWH Analytics. Isaac, thanks for joining me today.
Yeah, great to be here.
We're down here in sunny San Diego for the big industry event put on by Solar Plaza called Asset Management North America. A lot of industry experts here this week. What are you most excited to hear about at this conference?
As an asset management conference, it's interesting to hear how the asset managers who are maintaining and operating the sites, how they address it, their concerns, as well as some of the best practices. Also interested to hear how we're scaling up that workforce and how we're making sure we train them and implement best practices, especially since solar is a growing, emerging technology where it changes over time as well.
Yeah, as this industry continues to grow, technicians, this labor shortage that we're kind of facing in the industry is a big topic. Have you heard anything where anyone's addressing that in like a really unique way right now?
I've heard some. I know Amanda's I heard from you. She's going to be rolling out some new training programs online. But by and large, there are some issues there. We've seen some incidences of faulty installation, and it's a lack of training. So a big problem, with renewables doubling and the workforce needing to double as well every 3 to 5 years, that's a lot of individuals that you need to make sure are calibrated and uniform in their O&M practices.
Yeah, 100%. It's a great call. Amanda Bybee at Amicus is launching this new training program, like you mentioned. Yeah, I'm excited about that. We're seeing AI and automation revolutionizing many industries. What have you seen in our specific space, the renewable energy space, as it pertains to AI and how that might benefit us?
Yeah, we've seen some interesting robots. So like On-Site is here. They've got robots and sensor arrays that they have on site so they can monitor. We're also seeing a lot of automation as far as like tracking performance, as well as like any hazards at a site. We see that on like battery storage as they're trying to look at how batteries are performing, making sure they're balanced and that their temperatures are in check. So we see a lot of those integrations. There's a lot of third-party companies also that are coming in and doing monitoring across assets. One of the things I'll be talking about is like at the conference or hosting a panel on is how do you do that across different technologies and keep it uniform, and what are those challenges?
It's going to be interesting to see who addresses that across the portfolio, as you said. Battery storage really emerging, across the U.S. Mm-hmm. How is that different for you at KWH Analytics when you look at like more traditional renewable solar and what you've done there for a long time versus battery? How's that a different business for you guys to embrace?
Yeah, it's helpful. So very necessary to have batteries because solar, in order to be able to use that energy that you're generating during daylight hours and stretch it out, you need battery storage, mm-hmm. especially since we see peak performance or generation of electricity in the middle of the day, yet we see higher demand levels in the evening. So being able to stretch that out is very important, especially since the company's infrastructure and transmission lines are not as robust as we would need if we have it in remote areas or doing something larger scale. So having solar in the areas where you're going to be consuming the electricity is beneficial, and having battery to help us balance that and utilize that is great, but different challenges. If you're operating solar assets, it's different than battery, where you've got different technologies, different containerized boxes, different footprints, and then different technicians for some of that as well.
Yeah, before we got started today, you were talking to me about how you're already hearing at the conference, transmission infrastructure, and that whole piece is going to be a big topic du jour this week. It's a limiting factor as we grow, and we need some solutions there.
Absolutely.
Speaking of innovations, what have you seen specific to sustainability in like the built world, commercial real estate, as it relates to clean energy? What are sort of some exciting innovations you've seen lately, or maybe that you've heard about at the show so far?
We see a lot of rooftop solar, and we see some carports, but we're also seeing like battery storage at commercial real estate come into play. Beneficial as potentially a replacement, depending on the application, for diesel generators or backup power, particularly for like office buildings or other areas where you need reliable electricity. Also, we're seeing like car chargers go into some of these commercial portfolios, and pairing that with solar and battery storage is beneficial. We see different technologies or systems to mount them on the roofs and on carports, as well as best practices for some of the control equipment like inverters, things like that, where in the past where we were building without some of these standards, you'd see vehicle strikes for inverters, and that can obviously be a problem and expensive. So just making sure that you're accounting for some of those unique risks and challenges.
For a commercial real estate company that's been dependent on a generator to power their business in times of need, and they're transitioning to a battery backup system, what's the benefits for them beyond just the fact that they've got that energy storage when they need it?
Yeah, they can absolutely use that as a revenue source. So they can charge up the battery in the morning and have backup power during the day or overnight. And then in those evening hours where we see some of the peak demand on the grid, they can push it out into the market and get paid for that. So is an opportunity there as well. And then as well as with solar and renewables, you can get some of the tax credits associated with that, which is beneficial even more broadly, aside from just energy generation and security.
Makes sense why so many people are going that route right now. I'm sure you're going to have a lot of conversations this week. What are you most looking forward to talking with folks about as it relates to KWH Analytics and what you guys bring to market?
Yeah, so we provide data products, but we also do insurance, and that's where we spend a lot of our time focusing. One of the challenges we have is getting information on how they operate the assets and resilient best practices to the insurance carrier through their broker, to try and take that into consideration when we're providing insurance terms. So like the limits that we'll put out, deductibles, those can be impacted by more resilient best practices. But we find one of the biggest challenges is getting that information passed through. So learning what are best practices and promoting that has been beneficial for us.
For folks that might not know, KWH Analytics, famous in the market for quite some time for your solar product. Can you talk a little bit about that and what that is?
Sure. So we have the Solar Put was our first insurance product. We started selling that in 2017. That is essentially like a production guarantee of sorts. It is an insurance policy, but you insure output of a solar project. So if it underperforms, then you get paid. That's typically provided some stability to cash flows for projects, and then allows them to either get additional debt or additional debt considerations when they're financing that project. So multi-year product. Through that, we also got a lot of O&M data, and using that and asset owners asking us to help step in and support property insurance, started selling property insurance as well.
You mentioned production guarantee. The other term you hear a lot in our industry is performance guarantee. Can you talk about sort of the difference there if people are hearing both as sort of an optionality for protecting their investment?
Yeah. So like performance guarantees would be like uptime and degradation. Those are some of the inputs into how we consider and price a production guarantee. But we're saying if a site is expected to produce at a certain level, we will ensure a band of coverage to a separate level. So there's some risk retained by that insured. And then if they underperform, we work with them to indemnify, but also resolve it so that they can perform up to their production estimate or benchmark that we've set with them.
It's putting real dollars and cents behind the performance guarantee.
It is, yeah.
Nice. So solar industry continues to mature. Solar assets are existing for a longer time, and they're producing for a longer time. How are those longer life cycles affecting your business when you're sitting here insuring these products for a longer period of time?
Yeah, they do require continued maintenance, but when you get to the end of their originally anticipated life cycle, it oftentimes makes sense to keep operating them rather than make the expenditure to remove them, whether from a site or a rooftop, and then reinstall. It makes sense just to continue generating electricity and revenue. So we've seen that be beneficial, but it does require continued and regular maintenance of those sites to make sure that they do continue to perform. So being at an asset manager conference, interesting to see how they're talking through that. Another challenge that we do see is if they do see a loss or they see impacts to some of that equipment and need to replace them, that they don't make those same panels. So they do have to go through some level of either a study or re-engineering to make sure that they're able to reconfigure the site to continue to perform.
You mentioned data as sort of a product you provide as well, in addition to insurance, and you mentioned degradation. Are you able to advise clients on what you're seeing as far as degradation rates with their sites, and are you able to like help them forecast what they might expect in the future?
When we do our solar revenue put, we will do a production forecast, but degradation rates across panels have been studied fairly well by panel manufacturers, thankfully. So we can talk about impacts that are special to their sites. By and large, degradation, they're not as worried about it as they used to be in the past. Yeah.
I love to hear that. When it comes to hardware specifically, what selection criteria do insurance underwriters look for like resilience on commercial properties when it comes to solar?
There is a little bit of a difference between what insurance companies prefer and what maybe asset owners would prefer. We like tried and tested panels with thicker glass that are going to be more resilient to like impacts. We look for like top tier racking manufacturers to make sure that they have a robust placement in the field or on the roof. But we do know that there are some assets where they're looking at their capital expenditures and making different selections. So thinner glass, lighter weight modules where they save money on not only the raw materials, but also transportation and handling costs. So there is a bit of a give and take there. It is beneficial, as we always say, to plan these things ahead of time and look and see what your insurance impacts will be, because that's where you would see the benefit from more resilient design and more expensive but more resilient hardware selection.
You mentioned protecting against impact, thicker glass. Outside of like someone with a house on a golf course and maybe worried about golf balls, I'm thinking you're probably talking about hail. That's a big risk across our industry, especially in certain parts of the country. What does KWH Analytics do to like address that? Is there any unique ways you're going to market to like try to mitigate risk around hail?
Yeah, a couple of different ways. As I mentioned, we're a big proponent on sharing information and making sure it gets back to those insurance companies. There's a couple of things that we've done recently. So we did have a press release that went out today. And that it was a case study where we had an asset where they had hardware that was able to do hail stow, but they hadn't implemented it. And so we offered them a deductible that then we would cut in half once they'd implemented hail stow. We did a warm referral to the tracker manufacturer. They were able to implement a robust hail stow program and their deductible reverted to the lower one. So benefit to the client, more resilient asset that's going to be around and perform through hailstorms. The tracker manufacturers is engaged, so it wins for everyone across the board. We also have a hail form that we've put together, and by form, I mean it's a questionnaire or a supplemental application to support risk management, but also insurance. And that talks about what are your hail stow or weather stow protocols, and that provides really robust data that can be used either by the risk managers, by their brokers, by the insurance companies to determine how resilient that asset is through how they're operating the asset for hail, wind, flood, winter storm, all of those.
Outside of hail, what are some of the other risk factors that someone who's considering purchasing a solar asset for their property should be concerned about or worried about and want to consult with you for protection against that?
So the loss drivers in the industry are natural catastrophe, so weather events. But secondarily to that, we do see a lot of industry calls them thermal events, but fires. So paying attention to vegetation management or for rooftop systems, even debris that may collect on the roof like leaves, and then wire management, as well as regular checks on the site to make sure that the panels are clear, they're operating correctly, that fasteners or connections have not worked loose. Those are big issues. We also do see some vandalism, so making sure that you do have site controls in place, typical commercial real estate best practices apply there as well, making sure that carports or panels are protected against vehicle strikes is beneficial. And then just being regular in your maintenance, washing your panels, clearing out debris it contributes to a lower risk profile.
So having a robust O&M plan when you put these assets in place, standard preventive maintenance, all that is really going to help mitigate.
Right. And then it continues to evolve. So staying up to date, making sure your staff's trained is beneficial.
Absolutely. How does your underwriting process differentiate between rooftop, carport, ground mount, et cetera, the different styles of farms that you'll see?
Yeah. So in our database, we have a lot of loss data. So we can see prior losses and differences between like carport and rooftop sites. So there are some differences there. So we will have a different base rate, but then also we'll look at secondary characteristics. So like how elevated are the panels if they're carports? Did you protect them against vehicle strikes? We usually can get an assessment around that. For rooftop installations, we'll look, is it permanently mounted to the roof, or is it a ballasted system?
Yep.
That's sitting on weights on the roof. That impacts some of those risk scores. And then if we can get details on O&M, oftentimes we're able to get an O&M contract. We can consider all of their O&M activities as we're underwriting and giving feedback to those clients on their risk.
Wow, excellent. What maintenance practices most significantly reduce insurance premiums?
So as I mentioned, hail is a big one, but number 2 is fire. So making sure you have a plan in place and then communicating that to the carrier. So are you paying attention to the connectors? There's also other best practices that sometimes asset owners don't think about. So one that we request or will ask and recommend is talk to your local fire response team. We have some incidences where a rooftop solar site was burning and the fire department showed up and they were concerned, can I spray water on this or will I get electrocuted? Yeah. And they waited a while before they made that determination. So talking to the fire department saying, yes, you can spray water on this. There's emergency shutoff valves and making sure they're familiar with all of that. That's beneficial to the site so that fire knows how to respond and can mitigate the extent of the loss.
How's the integration? This is where I was going to go next anyway. How's the integration of battery storage changing that risk profile for these sites when it's solar plus storage?
Yeah, storage is evolving. So the batteries that are being installed today are quite different than those that were being installed 3 or 4 years ago. So paying attention to how those batteries are assembled and the containers and how they're built, making sure that you have adequate controls. And then they do require a different level of monitoring to make sure that if something gets out of balance or is not working entirely correctly, that it's addressed right away. There are some thermal runaway risks for batteries and making sure that you're monitoring for conditions that can contribute to that. And then again, paying attention to a fire response and how you would address a fire should one occur is important and helpful.
Yeah, crucial. There are folks out there who are going beyond just solar and battery storage, creating microgrids that might include things like natural gas or other sources of energy. Do you work with clients like that? Are you able to support beyond renewable energy solutions?
We do. Our primary expertise is solar and battery storage. So that's where we primarily focus, but we can and we will. We know even commercial real estate clients may have some mixture of energy, and it's an energy portfolio that you do need to consider. A lot of these asset owners, insureds are transitioning to a more robust renewables plan because it is beneficial. It's cheaper to install. You get tax credits and other advantages. So we are seeing that transition even on some smaller portfolios.
Well, it's good for me to hear. How does your proprietary data help quantify the benefits of proactive maintenance on a site?
Yeah. So when we're doing a risk assessment, we look at each location by individual peril exposed at that location. So I mentioned natural catastrophes, but then we'll also look at attritional losses or other losses that they may see, and we'll give that assessment, and then we give feedback to that client on, okay, here are key locations in your portfolio, and these are key perils, and then we'll give best practices on how to mitigate those. If they're open to it, we can give feedback through their broker on just broad best practices that they can implement. And then if we confirm those, we can give more beneficial terms, lower deductibles, maybe a shorter waiting period for business interruption coverage, which is their loss of revenue. There are other policy terms that could be beneficial for that client.
What spare parts inventory recommendations do you make for clients?
Oftentimes, their deductible would need to cover an inverter. That's a typical kind of base deductible sizing. So making sure that they have an inverter on hand, and inverters oftentimes will need to be either refurbished or updated during the long-term life cycle of the asset. So having some spare parts and being able to address that as problems arise is beneficial. Having panels that you can put in the site if some are damaged is also helpful, and carriers do take that into consideration. I will admit that not all of these asset owners are sharing the details of their inventories, but that is beneficial for them. Also, longer term, as you have an aging asset, you can oftentimes either utilize those spare parts, spare panels, spare inverters, or you can sell them on the secondary markets. But it also makes sense to say, if I have a larger loss and I don't have adequate panels to replace them, what is my plan? And so you can reach out to engineering firms who are happy to do studies and come up with a resiliency plan so that if something should happen, you know how you would respond. And then insurance carriers will take that into consideration as well.
How are fire safety protocols evolving for commercial solar and storage solutions?
Fire safety protocols are not advancing as rapidly as we would expect. So like my real life example of a fire department showing up and not knowing if they can spray water, that's a real example. So making sure that you're taking some ownership or control over of your site plan or how you'll respond to any event, particularly fire, is important. We've seen more robust vegetation management where we're paying attention to grow cycles for like ground mount solar, but then also those best practices of like cleaning the roof and clearing debris and making sure connectors are undisturbed. There's not firm regulations around that are consistent. So making sure that like the industry as a whole talks about it and encourages best practices is especially important and helpful.
Yeah, we got to get there faster, to your point. What trends are you seeing in claims data that commercial real estate owners should consider when designing their installations?
For commercial real estate claims data, again, the largest perils are severe convective storms and natural catastrophes. So having a plan on how to respond is beneficial. Other things that we've seen are incidences of vandalism. We've also seen like vehicle strikes. So typical things that would damage traditional real estate property are impacting solar, especially as it becomes more prolific. We see a lot of carports, and we've actually seen some larger carport losses in the industry because you may take out a whole row of carports if you hit it just right. So just paying attention to how you would respond to an event is how you can kind of reduce some of those exposures. We see a lot of, unfortunately, head scratching when a claim comes and they don't know quite what do we do on day one to try and get this back operational. So watching out for potential hazards and planning and prepping for them is absolutely beneficial.
This show is called The Future of CRE Sustainability. If you put on your prognosticator's hat, where do you see this industry going in the next, say, 5-10 years?
Yeah, since we are lagging on our distribution, I see a lot more commercial property, real estate utilizing renewables. So we'll see more office buildings, hotels, even, of course, we are seeing today some habitational, so condos, apartments, things like that, utilizing solar, and I think that will continue. There's benefits that they provide to their tenants. So solar carports provide carports for vehicles, which is awesome. Benefits to those tenants. Having some battery storage and resilience is beneficial as well. We see some benefits when you're putting solar on the roof that like shingles will last longer because you're protecting them against hail, and solar panels can handle, especially if you got thicker glass panels, handle more hail than a traditional roof for a longer period of time. So there are benefits to the property that you see from implementing those. So similar to residential, where you see new housing complexes, there's going to be solar on most of those roofs for new housing developments. I think we'll see that in the commercial real estate segment as well, on warehouses, on apartments, condos, and even, like I said, hotels and retail strips. Other real estate is going to utilize that opportunity.
I tend to agree. We were talking earlier about it. The incentives make it to where the payback period is such that it just makes dollars and cents to make that investment.
True. So not only do you have energy generation, you're getting revenue from that or a lower utility cost, but also for asset owners, they can either utilize the production tax credit or investment tax credit, but they can also, under the IRA, sell those or transfer them. So there's money opportunities there or ways to fully utilize renewable energy.
This conference kicked off with a word cloud from a survey they did of the audience, and the biggest word by far up there was tariffs. Unsurprising given what's going on in the marketplace. What are your thoughts on how that could impact our industry, or specifically what you provided to the industry?
It absolutely could. There's a lot of uncertainty as far as tariffs and what the net result will be. And so there's a lot of discussion. So us as an insurance carrier, we're talking about it with the brokers, we're talking about it with asset owners. I always plan ahead. So come up with a strategy. We can work with those insurers if we see asset values change or replacements costs change, we can address that and have those conversations and look at limits on the policy. We can have open discussions around those. So as we know more, we can plan more. We are seeing insureds take the opportunity to build up more robust spare parts inventory, and that's wise. But there are also domestic or North American suppliers of this equipment. They've been fairly heavily utilized because of anti-dumping, countervailing duties provisions. So we've seen some of those impacts already, but there's still a lot of uncertainty as it materializes. I think having open discussions and talking about what those impacts are, planning ahead, where will we source panels in the future, that's helpful for everyone as long as we're talking about it and we have a plan.
Isaac, if people want to learn more about you and the work you're doing at KWH Analytics, where's the best place for them to go?
Yeah, visit our website. We are also active on LinkedIn. If you're looking for insurance, reach out to your broker. Of course, you can always reach out to us and we can loop back to brokers. But also we attend events like the Solar Asset North American Conference. We attend other conferences such as RIMS and which is the risk industry conference. So we attend all of those, but feel free to reach out to myself or others, and we're happy to get those individuals in contact with the right people within our company and loop in the other people that may help broaden the conversation.
Well, great. Isaac, thank you so much for joining me on the show today. I really appreciate it. For all my guests, I'll see you on the next episode of the Future of CRE Sustainability. I'm your host, Sean. Thank you so much for joining.